time for some more Euro fun. This one's Automobile, a Martin Wallace game. I know some people say Martin Wallace isn't a Euro designer, but this is certainly more Euro than not to me. Then again, I probably feel the same about things like Indian Abyss down there. Alright, start things off. Other people have covered this. If you want the rules, that's probably, or a good light overview, or a good overview at all, that's probably where you want to go. I do this as an introduction, though, with all my games that I run. I've read the rules, I've played it before, I've read the rules again, yet doing them on camera helps me get a grasp of the game, and also maybe for some of you it gives some additional information about how difficult it is to grasp the rules of this. Of course, I may also make mistakes, such as life. One of the things, very recently I covered Locomotive Works, and I was comparing the mechanisms to this game to Locomotive Works, and to tell you the truth, I don't know why I made that connection other than the visual appearance of different, eras of vehicles as you go forward. Locomotive Works, you're competing on particular vehicles. This one is a little different, well, on particular types of factories. This one's a little different where you're competing just in 3 ranges of cars, and the whole time elements work differently. I thought this one actually used the same basic mechanism as Locomotive Works, and I apparently just somehow absorbed other people's videos on Locomotive Works and tied it into this picture in my head or something. I don't know. This is a much, much heavier sort of game in terms of the type, the amount of different things that you have to do in a turn. Locomotive Works has 4 rules basically. Yeah, there's a little extension to them, but largely it's fairly simple. Now this all does get covered in a small turn sequence with a few player aids on the back of the rule book, which cover most of what you need to know. I mean, this isn't a serious simulation, but it is fairly topical, and I'd say Locomotive Works is too, but this one goes into a bit more details. Let's look at some of those details. First of all, the board. Wow, there's a whole bunch going on in here, isn't there? You have these different elements of cars running, from these very old horseless carriages up to the cord. And, you got, what, 40 years of vehicles basically here. And those are going to be different different cars that you can build factories for. Each player is going to get a claim on any given car. So if I'm the one building Durias, no one else is going to build those. Other people are going to build later cars in the range. Each of the cars is divided into 3 different types. These are middle-class cars, basically. These are low-class, mass-produced cars, and then these are fancy, high-class cars. Although, I'll tell you, this one looks fancier than that to me. I don't know. This one certainly does. But that's just a matter of appearances rather than, say, all the little doodads that are included in it. And this one is, I don't know what a Pathfinder 40 is. Okay. So you got a lot of pretty pictures of cars, which of course right away, bang, that gets me excited. You have these innovators in the field. Not all of them are technological innovators, although obviously Ford and Kettering are. But then you have some more industrial ones like Durant and Sloan, and then a sales in Howard, an innovator of sales, as it were. You have these spaces, which is where cars are sold to. And you'll notice these are luxury cars. They're always going to sell at one price, but the other cars can sell at a reduced price if you're offering a discount on them. That's going to be involving these little gray tiles, or cube discs. Let's just keep throwing words out there till we get one that sort of fits. Over here, this is your turn record track, and this tells you some interesting things. For example, the cost that you're going to pay for each black cube that you hold. Those are going to be loss cubes. Those cause you problems that your industry is just going to start accumulating, sort of like disease, corporate rot, however you want to put it, and you're going to fight against those. There are ways for you to take task against them. This is just simply the turn. This indicates how many demand markers. Now, demand markers are going to be in this bag, and I'll pull a few out to show you them. These little things. Each player basically pulls some of those. So in the first phase, wow, it's like I'm going over the rules without the rule book. What about that? Almost professional or something. In the first phase, or the first turn of the game, all that's going to come out is one middle-class car demand for each player. In the second turn, and the way this is designed, it really does help explain the game. In the second turn, one middle class and one low class car is going to be in each person's hand. The way you determine that is that each person is going to draw two of these demand tiles. They look at them and they know the higher valued one is going to go to the middle class car, the lower value one is going to go to the mass produced cars. That gets reversed on turn 3, where the higher demand goes to the lower class cars, and at the end, when all demand is determined, there's going to be a random chip picked for how much demand for high class cars there are. And then the same situation exists for the final turn, and there's only 4 turns to the game, except there's going to be one additional surprise bonus demand for low class cars at the end of the period. Hey, it's the Depression, man. Over here, this is going to indicate what happens in each turn, and I'll go over this as we when we go through the rules a little bit more detail, but whatever. Here you mark loans. If you end up taking a loan, you put it here. If you end up taking a second loan, you put it here. Each loan gives you $500, but when you take them out, from then on, each turn you're going to be paying $50 in interest, and at the end of the game, it's going to cost you $600 to repay the loan. You're not allowed to repay it before the end of the game. Let's just scramble everything up here. Okay, this is going to be your production chart for cars based on the number of factories of each model you have. And the factories are going to be represented with these counters here. You also have this tooling or parts factory, which reduces the cost of cars. These are the cost of the different cars that you produce. So if I had one factory sitting in a luxury car thing, I could produce 1 or 2 luxury cars at $100 each. And if I had the tool factory attached to it, they'd only cost me $80 each. If I had 2 factories there instead, and the tool factory, I could produce 3 to 4 cars. I can't produce 1 to 2, and they'd be still costing me $80 each. The tool factory will help all the factories in the space. As I produce cars, and that's an action that you take, and we'll explain that. That's going to be one of these actions. These little chits go on the board, so if I produced, say, 2 of those over here, I just throw 2 little car chits in there, and those will be available for sale later. This section has to do with salesmen and showrooms. You've got these salesman markers, and you're going to have the ability to put them over in a showroom, and then eventually they'll be able to sell you some cars based on their ability there. If you have more salesmen than you need to sell cars, you got a problem, and you start taking loss cubes for that. They're limited to the type of car, so if I put somebody, if somebody's in this zone, in general they don't have to stay here. They're allowed to move in one direction, but it does limit my flexibility. If I'm, say, up here, I can only go down to a middle range. I can't start selling low-end cars through that shop. What else? This is going to be your turn order chart, sorta, kinda. Okay. The way turn order is going to work, this is actually your selection chart. And at the beginning of the game, it's sort of randomly determined. It doesn't really matter where people are sitting or whatever. Basically, first person could be the youngest player, could be randomly determined, and then everybody else around the board. But after that, the game is going to determine the order of play. So this is going to be the order of selecting people. And you select people, I guess, over here. We'll get to this. I don't know what that does. I have real trouble with iconography of any kind. But most of this board is laid out pretty well. This is going to be your executive decisions, which I think come in this phase or something. Yeah, these are the salesmen, I think, so this is going to be executive decisions. These are things that you can pick, sort of bonus actions that you can buy. This one is shutting down a factory. Now, you're able to do that at other times in the game. These are advertising chits, and they're going to cost you these little white tokens. Now, these little white tokens are research and development, and they come attached. First of all, you get some on your own, but they also come attached to the various industry leaders that you can hire. So at the beginning of the game, at the beginning of each turn, you're going to be picking one of these guys in selection order, and then that's going to determine your turn order. So this guy would be going in this order, and you also get this chit, which might give you special abilities as well as research and development. Well, when you hit here, you're going to get to use your research and development to buy advertising cubes. The first advertising thing bought costs you 2 research and development cubes. The next ones that anyone buys only cost 1 each, and these are discounts, which allow you to sell more cars at reduced value. The reduced value, of course, being these values. Okay, so that kind of explains the board. What about the chits? Well, these are your salesmen, factories, tools, actual automobiles, and a loan marker. You've got this for your turn order marker, and that's all we've got. All right, let's go very briefly through the sequence of play to see what happens. So the first thing you do is draw demand tiles, and that's this little mark. And we already explained how that happens. You draw 1 or 2 of them, you peek at them, they give you a hint as to what is sellable and what is not that turn. Then you go through the character selection in this order. Then you get your player actions, and you're allowed to take, basically you go around 3 times in player order. And player order is determined by this. The first person, say it's Ford, gets to choose one of these. Then the next person, either Kettering or Sloan or whatever, gets to choose another one. And then once everybody's chosen, they go through that twice more. But you have, what, 5 different actions to take there. You can build a factory. Building a factory, this is an interesting thing. If you're building a factory where you already have one, and this is to improve the total number of factories you have and therefore the number of cars you can build, you just pay the cost of the factory. But if you're building one where you don't have a car yet, well, if you're building the most advanced factory, one beyond where anybody has a car, let's take an example. Let's say this is here and somebody wants to build this thing. Not only do you pay the cost for the first factory, but you have to toss a research and development cube for that. You can skip over cars. So if this one existed, I could build this one for 1 research and development cube. And by the way, this one costs a research too, because it starts out empty. This, I could pay 1 research and development cube. For this one, I pay 1 plus 2 is 3 research and development. If I want to buy this one, it's 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6 research and development, and so on. So obviously, there's a limit to how far you can push the technology. And once you do that, all the cars behind you don't require research and development cubes anymore. And some of them could be very good deals. Usually, it's not terribly interesting to push the development too much. So for example here, if I'm sitting on the first choice, if I don't want this, all my choices is for more expensive factories for more modern cars. Now why would I want to do that? Well, because the older the car is, the older the type of car is, the more loss cubes you're going to take. And you could be accumulating them right from the beginning. I've never played this in 5. I've actually only played the illegal game in 2. I remember it being vaguely fun, but maybe a little too busy. Okay. Placing salesmen. Damn, how do you do that? All right. I guess I have to actually look at the rules at this point. Okay. Placing salesman. That says... Oh, I left something out, which is the parts factory. You can buy that. It's going to cost you some amount of money. $500 no matter where you put it. We already kind of know what it does. It reduces the cost of all the cars that you build in the space that you build it in. Okay. Placing salesman. As an action, you can put up to 3 of your salesmen in a sales room display. You'll almost always want to put, well, you will always want to put them in the mid-level cars because you'll have the opportunity to shift them after that. You could put them elsewhere, though. There's no limit to the number of salesmen that can be in any one showroom, but you are limited by countermix and everything in this game. I think. It may be something that you're not, like lost cubes or something like that. You probably aren't in cash if somehow you figure out how to overcome that. At the beginning of the game, there's only going to be demand for mid-level cars, which is okay because there aren't a lot of different factories, but there's 5 players. Only 4 mid-level factories, then you get to a low end, and then another mid-level, and then another low end, etc. Well, you're not going to be able to sell that low-end car for without having salesmen on the board. So that's something you want to contemplate if you're thinking about buying this car, and with 5 players you might well be building that kind of car. You need to leave space for the salesman there. And you also have to keep in mind that you don't want to produce a lot of cars because all you'll be able to sell has to do with your salesman. We'll get to how the salesmen actually work in a little while. I don't really remember that. Another option is you can take 2 white cubes from the stock as your action. You can do research. You could also produce cars. Producing cars, as many factories as you have open as you like, you can spend the money to run those factories. And you base it on, well, as many factory spaces. But if you have, say, 3 factories in a space, you cannot build less than the minimum number of cars at that level. So you can't say, well, I'm only running half that factory or something like that. The other limitations, you can't go over your amount of cars. You have 28 cars on the board. If you're in a situation where your choice is between, you know, let's say you have, well, you can't have that, but if you're in a situation where you have a certain number of cars, let's say you have 2 of these, 2 places with 3 factories each and 1 with 2, well, if you built, say, 28 cars with your first 2 factories, you cannot trigger this one. In fact, if you built 20 cars with this factory, you could then build 8 with this, so that's not a big deal. So I don't think there's a real problem because you can't have 9 factories. So basically, if somehow you can't legally build all your cars, you have to choose not to take a build action on that particular model. And then none of its factories will produce. But I probably explained something that's impossible there. Anyway, you pay your cash and you get your cars piled up there. And now you're obligated to try to sell those cars. That's another issue. The 5th action that you can take is to close down a currently operating production space. Now, there's a couple of reasons you want to do this. One, you need to get your factories back because you only have 8 of these counters. And, well, there's obviously a lot of cars coming. And you don't want to leave your obsolete cars on the board. Remember, they're going to produce some of these lost shits that you don't want. Okay. So, when you close down a factory, and this is kind of shitty in the rules here. There's this is in italics. The other thing that's in italics are examples in the game. This is the only place where something important is in examples. So, of course, my brain just says ignore that because I ignore examples if something makes sense. But this is a key rule, and, well, we can blame whatever. But overall, these are better than most Martin Wallace rules. You got to blame Mayfair for doing a better job on this. And they've done a fantastic job on the components as well, except maybe the paper money. The paper money is rather thin, has very little texture. Most people don't use it, so whatever. Okay, so when you close down a factory, you discard half your loss cubes rounded up. So this is a way to ditch some of your loss. You cut your operating expenses, essentially. And that gives you a big bonus, because you're going to be paying money per loss cube each turn. All right. Then for each factory that you remove from the space, you get cash equal to $100 less than it costs to build the factory, which in the case of the parts factory, that cost you $500, so you're going to get $400 back. But in the others, it's based on, you know, the technology of the car. So you see they get up to $750 here, but they start out at $200. So you get a bigger proportion back with more modern factories, for whatever that matters. But that means you have those factories back, so you can start opening up new car factories, newer ones. Cars produced earlier in the same turn stay on the space. So, you know, if I produced some cars with this factory, and then I close the factory, and I mark the factory as closed with this thing, I still have those cars to sell, and I could still take losses if I don't manage to do so. The number of closed factory pieces is not limited by the game. That's the key thing that's not. If you end up using too many, which is quite likely, well, you take them off the bottom end and move them to the front. And that shouldn't affect anything in play. If it's going to, you can pretend there's a you can put a fake marker there or something to do that. It would be a very weird game if that happened. Okay. All right, so what we've done is we've picked the two chits, then here we picked our leader, our dude, and then these are our 3 actions. And now we go to the next thing, which is the Howard special ability. The guy Howard, who comes with no research and development. If you have Howard, you must sell 2 of your cars to him. They're sold from any production spaces. You can split them, and you sell them at the full value of the car, which means, you know, 150 or 100 or 200. You must do this. And you could say, well, why wouldn't you want to? Well, you might want to try to flood the market or something. You can't do that with Howard. He just creates extra demand for bonus. Okay, now you sell cars by salesman. What you're going to be doing is following the player order here, and each player has an opportunity to sell 1 car through a salesman. This is done until everybody is unable to do any more or unwilling to. When it's your turn to sell a car, you pick a salesman that you have on the board. You can move him up or down 1 layer. And then you're allowed to move him to one of these spaces. Now, there's a limitation to what space you can move him to, and it's based on the turns. So these can be used on any turn. These only in turns 2 and later, and these on the last turns. So, you know, if I had a low-end car, I would put my salesman down. I'd move him down here to here, 1 space over and 1 there. And now I've sold 1 car. And I believe that car is going to be sold at full price. Just like Howard. And until everybody's done with this, or all these boxes are filled for the turn, you just keep going in player order and let everybody sell what they wish. This can be an important way to get additional sales out. This is not based on the demand, and it doesn't affect the demand. Neither does Howard. The next thing you go to is the executive decisions track, which is here. And again, each player is able to go this is done in player order again. And the first player chooses either this, or one of these. Okay. Only one person gets this, and the others are also limited by the number of spaces there are. The person who gets this can close a factory, just like as if he took his player turn action to do it, and that's here. Wait, no, that's the salesman, that's here. I'll never remember this. Okay. I'm sure that track I'm always going to be screwing it up, but whatever. And loans you can take at whatever time you need them. So, if I do this, it's just as if I picked that action. If I do this, I spend 2 white cubes, and I put this on a particular factory. And I am now advertising that factory. I'll be able to sell more cars of that type of factory when I come to the demand. With these, if I pick one of these, I can also sell more, but I've done another thing. I've reduced the price of the car, and I can only put that on the mid and lower value cars. I can also pass. If I pass, I get my player turn marker off here, and it goes into the earliest spot on here. So I'm going to get the earlier pick next turn. All right, selling cars via demand. Now everybody turns up the demand tiles that they picked earlier in the game, and they've been holding these earlier in the turn. They've been holding these hidden. And, well, on the first turn, it's just going to be the mid-level demand. Then we start expanding it as we go. In addition, any bonus demand tiles are drawn at this point and are also turned face up and exposed. That's how many cars of that type can be sold. High level, mid-level, low level. All right. Now, following the order of the cars on the track, starting with the most modern car possible, we go down the track. So if you start with the most modern, well, it gets to sell 1 car at the full value track. However, there are some modifiers there. If you have any of these things in there, you're going to get to sell more cars. How many more? Damned if I know. I know it's 1 more with advertising, and you're only allowed to have 1 advertising cube per car. And likewise, discount, I think each discount allows you to sell 1 additional car? Yes. So if you have a double discount marker, you're able to sell 2 additional cars, so you sell 3 each time it's that car's turn to sell. Okay, so what happens, let's say we have some cars up here. Okay. And we'd have some demand. This guy would get to sell 1 car, this guy gets to sell 1, this guy gets to sell 1, etc. But if this guy, say, had an advertising chit, this guy would sell 1, this guy would sell 2. Let's give this guy a discount marker. This guy would sell his 2 at the lower price. And you're just throwing them into these boxes. You'll collect the money later. The double discount still is only at the lower price. It's just you get more picks, so you'd usually take that. The only reason you wouldn't, just maybe if you want to be nice to somebody else, I don't know. All right. Once you meet the demand, no more cars of that level are sold. But if you wrap around, so let me see. If I had a demand of 4, and we had this kind of situation, he'd sell 1, he'd sell 1, he'd sell 1, and he'd sell 1. And then these 2 are a problem. But these guys all get sold, we wrap back around. Okay. All right, then you grab the cash, the number of cars you sold times the price you sold them at, and maybe they're sold at different prices if they're from different types of car. All the cars that you sell at a discount from a discount factory at this point go into the discount price bin. And you can see you're not making all that much on those. So it costs you 70 bucks to build one of these cars, but you only get 100 at discount. That's not very good. All right. Somewhere or another, okay, any unsold cars give you a penalty loss cube. And those bigger penalty loss cubes are 5, count as 5 cubes. So you can make change. Now you pay for your loans. Remember, 50 bucks per loan that you have, and you're only allowed 2 loans throughout the course of the game. And you're also, you're also going to take a penalty for your production spaces. The most advanced car model of the given class of car, high, low, medium, does not take any cubes. But every other car space behind it takes cubes equal to the number of spaces it is behind. So, if we're in this position, I'm just going to mark these with cars rather than factories, but actually the cars would all be off here. This one wouldn't pay anything, this one would get a cube, and this one would get 2 cubes. If this was out here at the same time, this one wouldn't pay anything, this one wouldn't pay anything, and these two get 1 and 2 cubes respectively. Close down factories count against. So this one wouldn't pay, this one wouldn't pay. Nobody pays for this, but this one pays 2 cubes, or gains 2 cubes as it were. Alright. All pretty simple. At this point, you may have some bonuses. For example, if you have Sloan, his special ability allows you to, at this point, discard half the new lost cubes that you just took. So if you took, say, 9, you'd get to throw 5 of them back into the pool. Chrysler allows you to discard a number of lost cubes equal to the turn that it is. So you can get rid of older lost cubes here. Sloan helps you integrate older cars. Chrysler allows you to get rid of bad business practices that have built up over time. And now you pay a cost based on the turn. It's 10 bucks times the turn per lost cube you have. And you might have to take out a loan at this point to pay off your loans and your lost cubes, conceivably. Then all the demand tiles go back into the bag for draw for next turn. Character tiles go back in their boxes. This gets restocked. Unclaimed R&D cubes do not carry over. Yeah. The turn marker moves 1 forward. And we play until the 4th turn. Okay, I want to look up that unclaimed R&D cubes because I'm not sure. Yeah, you get them. Okay. So when you select the character, you just get those R&D cubes. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have to use them that turn from the way that was worded. Okay, at the end of the game, you get money equal to the factories that you have on the board. Each factory that you have, you get the full cash value of it returned to you. You also get 500 bucks for a parts factory, and you add that to your cash on hand. You have to repay your loans. They're 600 bucks each now, and you can't do it earlier. And whoever has the most cash wins. If it's tied, whoever chose to go earliest in the order of play on the last turn wins. Sounds simple. There's a lot of decision making going on here, but I don't really feel like you can pre-calculate too much. We'll see how much this irritates me in terms of, is there going to be a lot of counting ahead and everything going on in it? I seem to remember that being an issue, but I'm not so sure if that's just an artifact of the 2-player game, like in what I just played, Hansa, where in 5 players, you really don't have enough information about the board as a whole to control the game the way you can in 2. And again, you know, sometimes with all the hidden information there is, etc., you just try to play the best you can and make kind of opportunistic decisions, and that's the kind of game I like. And I'm hoping it plays out more like that than the kind of really dominating and controlling the board type of game that it did in 2. All right, let's send this one up.